The last thing my son ever said to me before he walked out of my life was, "You ruined everything, Mom." He didn't shout it. That's what stayed with me. He said it quietly, like a verdict already decided, like there was no room left for explanation or mercy. His hand was already on the doorknob when he said it, his shoulders stiff, his eyes fixed somewhere over my head, as if looking directly at me might crack something open he wasn't ready to feel. That door closed with a soft click. Not a slam, just a click. And just like that, 26 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, burnt pancakes, and whispered prayers were reduced to silence. I stood there for a long time after he left, my palm pressed flat against the wood of that door, feeling the cold seep into my skin. The house felt hollow in a way I didn't know how to name back then. The kind of hollow that echoes even when you're not speaking. I didn't chase him. I didn't beg. I didn't call after him. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew, deep down, that he had already made me the villain in his story. And villains don't get closing arguments. Before all of that, before the silence, before the blame, my life was painfully ordinary. I was the kind of mother who woke up before the alarm clock because my body just knew. The kind who folded laundry while watching reruns she'd already memorized, who kept spare change in a ceramic bowl by the door, who burned toast more often than she liked to admit. My son, Daniel, used to tease me about that. "Mom, how do you burn bread when the toaster pops up by itself?" he'd say, laughing as he scraped the blackened edges with a knife. We lived in a modest two-bedroom house with beige walls and creaky floorboards that sang if you stepped too hard in the hallway. The kitchen window faced east, and every morning, the sunlight would hit the sink just right, making the water look like it was filled with gold. Daniel grew up there, learned to ride his bike in that driveway, broke his first bone falling out of the old oak tree in the backyard. I can still hear the sound he made when he came running inside, half crying, half apologizing, like getting hurt was somehow his fault. His father, Mark, was there in those early years too. On the surface, we looked like a family people nodded at in the grocery store. Respectable, quiet, stable. But families don't fall apart overnight. They crack slowly, in places no one else sees. Back then, Daniel saw his father as steady and strong. Mark coached his Little League games, helped with math homework, grilled burgers on Sundays like it was a sacred ritual. He wasn't the loud man. He didn't drink too much or yell in public. He was the kind of man people trusted easily. And I was the one who left. That's the part my son never forgave. When Daniel was 12, I packed 2 suitcases and told him we were going to stay with my sister for a while. I said it gently, like I was talking about a vacation. He sat on the edge of his bed, his socks mismatched, his mouth slightly open, trying to understand how a life could be folded into bags. "Why?" he asked me. I told him it was complicated. That was my first mistake. Children don't understand complicated. They understand presence and absence. And in his mind, I was the one who chose absence. After the divorce, Mark stayed in the house. I let him. Daniel stayed with him most of the time too. I told myself it was because of school district's stability routine. But the truth, if I'm being honest now, was that I felt like a guest in my own child's life. Like I had already been replaced by a version of myself that was easier to blame. Still, I showed up. I went to school plays where Daniel barely looked at me. I sat in the back row of basketball games, clapping softly so I wouldn't embarrass him. I sent birthday cards that were open days later, thank you texts that sounded polite instead of warm. As he got older, the distance hardened. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rare. When he left for college, he hugged me like you hug a distant relative, careful, brief, already pulling away. Mark, meanwhile, stayed exactly where he was in Daniel's heart. He never gave up on us. Daniel once said during an argument, his jaw tight. "You did." I swallowed the words that rose up then, the ones that tasted like blood and truth. Because how do you tell your child that the man he idolizes is the reason you couldn't stay? How do you explain that sometimes leaving is the only way to survive? So I stayed quiet. Years passed like that, me on the outside, loving him quietly, painfully, from a distance. Until the day he stopped answering my calls altogether. No warning. No fight. Just gone. I found out through my sister that he'd gotten engaged. I wasn't invited to the engagement party, or the dinner, or anything at all. When I finally worked up the courage to drive by his apartment one afternoon, just to see if his car was there, I sat in my parked car and cried so hard my chest hurt. The steering wheel was slick with my tears. I felt ridiculous, a grown woman spying on her own child like a stranger. That was when I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just being punished anymore. I was being erased. And I would have stayed erased too, if the past hadn't found a way to crawl back into the light. Because secrets have a way of getting tired. And the truth, no matter how carefully buried, always wants to be known.